Welcome to the Hidden Philanthropist podcast, proudly presented by the Purdie Foundation. Join us as we uncover the art of giving back.
Hey listeners, learning about how philanthropic enterprises are formed and operate, how they survive, thrive, and at times unfortunately fail has been fascinating. Kimberly Downes has been at the forefront of philanthropy for over 30 years now, and her insight into fundraising strategies is compelling. I hope you learn from and get inspired by this amazing human. I wanted to start today's podcast with a quote, and it's a quote that you know really well, and it was from Mother Teresa that said, "Every organisation must live their mission, develop their own culture of philanthropy. My role is to help your organisation become financially sustainable." So for someone that's marked up 30 years now in the philanthropic space as a philanthropy and fundraising strategist, your life mission is really to develop corporate entities' own culture of philanthropy and to help organisations become financially sustainable. So modern day Mother Teresa, Kimberly Downes, thank you for joining me today on The Hidden Philanthropist.
Oh, aren't you nice? Oh my goodness.
Well, I think that quote really sums up everything you're about, doesn't it?
It does, really. Thank you for having me today. Yeah, philanthropy is my life. I'm always looking for ways to give. I don't go out of this house without stuff in my bag that if I come across a homeless person, I give it to them. So it's always top of mind.
We touched on it before. Certainly now after 30 years and being the incredible woman you are, you're at the forefront of the philanthropic landscape. I would say the Australian landscape, but really globally. I mean, you've done all this sort of stuff overseas as well. It's been an incredible journey and I want to dig into that with you and dive into that today. What was it like for a young Kimberly, for a young Kim 27 years ago before you came out here to Australia?
I've always been a learner. So I was like a sponge. I just wanted to learn as much as I could. And when I worked in not-for-profits before I was recruited by the consulting firm, I always wanted to do as much as I could. And in some of the organizations, I was a grant writer, and that was the box you stayed in. And I'm like, well, I don't want to stay in this box. Let me volunteer and come help set up for that event or come to the alumni thing. And the organizations would be like, no, you're just the grant writer. And so that kind of frustrated me because I like to be involved in everything and really apply those best practice tools to every aspect of fundraising. So when the consulting firm recruited me, they started me at the bottom, the basics, even if I knew it, so that I did learn the tools of the trade. And when I came out to Australia, I was actually very tentative when I went to clients to open my mouth, because as soon as they heard the American accent, they'd say, you're just going to tell us how they do it in America and expect us to do it that way. And no, I'm not. The culture of philanthropy is all about what culture is not only here in Australia, but you have to create a culture within your organization. And what do you want that culture to be? And yeah, the tools of fundraising are universal, but it's how you adapt them to make them suit your organization. And so it was funny, a few years ago, I was at a conference and ran into a few Americans that had been recruited for a university in Queensland, and they were telling me what they were going to do. And I found myself biting my tongue, but not biting my tongue. And I said to them, please don't come here and do what Americans would do. And that's apply what you think works here, because you won't be here long. You need to learn the culture. And they just kind of went, what are you talking about? And not too long later, they called me and said, you know what? You were right. I'm like, you can't. The UK, New Zealand, Canada, the US, Australia, we're all different. There's some similarities, but when it comes to philanthropy, Australia is very different. They're very quiet in their philanthropy. And Australia's just been named the wealthiest nation. And what we need to do in that is embrace that and say, there's plenty of money here. And there's actually plenty of people also giving, but we just don't talk about it.
And you say philanthropy is different as you go across the globe and you look at it individually. You said New Zealand's different to Australia, different to America. I get that, but really fundamentally, philanthropy as a thing, you mentioned it earlier, is the 3 T's. Philanthropy, wherever you go, is fundamentally the same, isn't it?
It is. It's time, talent, treasure, those 3 T's. they understand it and they talk about it in the States and pretty much in Canada. Here, people don't relate to the word philanthropist because, one, they don't understand it, and two, it seems a bit hoity-toity.
What's the word philanthropist mean?
The love of humanity. Yeah, basic, simple. And I don't know if it's because of the tall poppy syndrome here, that if you talk about your philanthropy, people want to... Okay, I'll give you an example. We all know Twiggy Forrest is doing great things with his money. And somebody said to me one day, yeah, but what does he want out of it? And I just looked at them and said, why does there have to be an agenda? Why can't you just take it at face value? And maybe that's, again, the trusting, look at the good side of people in me. But I think we need to celebrate philanthropy and not put it down.
Tall poppy syndrome in Australia has come up in almost every one of my podcasts. Yeah, that's the truth.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah. Talking to people and talking about their challenges, and especially people that have forged a career in America, one of them being Charlie Teo.
Yeah.
I had a good chat with Charlie, and he just said, the difference between America and Australia is that Americans lift you up and celebrate what you do, and Australians bring you down and try and take your legs out from under you. And that's really sad.
It is really sad because that's not Australia. I mean, it is, but you look at everything else that happens in this country and they're so supportive of each other in a crisis or helping. So why we do that here is really a mystery to me.
It's almost like if you're on a level pegging or someone's underprivileged or disadvantaged or needs help. People are happy to help, but when someone else is doing better than you and he's seen to be giving more than you or helping more than you or doing better than you, it's like you need to bring them down. It's quite sad.
It is sad. Yeah.
So we've got to the point where we started at the point where you had your first job. There's a couple of things I want to touch on that later. But what led you before that to going down in the path of studying a psychology and marketing degree? I mean, were you always in this philanthropic space? Was there influences in your childhood? Were your parents philanthropists?
Yeah, as much as they could be. We were involved in the church. My parents were always volunteers and involved in the community, Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts. So I always remember that as a kid. And my grandmother and my mum would always say, you give what you can. There's always something to give. So yeah, no, it was a strong influence in my life. And I liked it. I liked helping other people. And in helping other people, I don't have the stomach to go be a nurse or a doctor or stuff like that. So I thought, yeah, if I could work in the not-for-profit space.
And was it that thought process that led you down the path of that degree, or was it that coming out of that degree that you really cemented your thought process that was the path you wanted to go down?
No, I think I knew I wanted to be in the not-for-profit space. And when I applied for jobs, it was just in not-for-profits. I didn't want to go corporate. Then after that first job, it really cemented the whole philanthropy thing. Yeah.
And another quote that I've actually cherry-picked this one off your website, so I know you know it really well, but it's not how much we give, but how much love we put into giving. That's a pretty special quote. My question for you is, what does philanthropy and the love of giving mean to you?
Oh, good question. Well, if you look around this room, there's lots of giving quotes. What it means to me is doing something for someone else to make their life better. And even if that's giving a croissant to a homeless person so that they have lunch that day, or just doing something and thinking about other people rather than yourself.
I guess we've touched on what it means to you in early days. So you arrive in Australia, you've got this real thirst and knowledge for the philanthropic space. What do you do? I mean, I know that we introduced you as a philanthropy and fundraising strategist. Let's dig down into that. What does that look like? What's your career? What's your job?
When I came to Australia, I was working for an international consulting firm. And so my career was all about knowing as much as I could about the fundraising tools, but also the psychology behind donors giving. I was working on one campaign and we were in the planning stages. And the chair of the campaign, every meeting he would come in and talk about, I'm going to give 10,000. And then the next committee meeting, I'm going to give 25,000. And so part of being a fundraising consultant or a strategist is listening. It's not about talking. It's about listening to other people and listening to what inspires them, what motivates them, what gets them where their passions are, And so he said to me and the fundraising person at the organization, he said, okay, I want you two to come and make your ask like you're going to do with everybody else so that I see and get a feel for what it's like. I went, okay, not a problem. So we went in and I said to the director of development, okay, we're going to ask him for 75. And he said, no, we're not. He said 25. I said, we're going to ask for 75. I said, I've seen his career, how he lives, where they go on holidays, what his wife's just given him for his 50th birthday. We're asking for 75. So we did the pitch and he looked at us and he said, okay, if you could just step outside my office for a minute, I'll be right with you. So we stepped outside the office and I said to the director, he's calling his wife. He said, oh, no, he's not going to give us the money. So we went back in and he said, okay, 75. And so when we left, the director was jumping up and down and he's like, why aren't you happy? I said, he answered too fast. We asked for too little.
Something that you touched on there, I want to come back and talk more about what you do as a strategist, but an interesting thing that you touched on there was the fact that he went in and rang his wife. A research paper you've recently done is how to engage women as donors. I want to talk about a few things in this area, but firstly, what did you learn from the research paper? And is there a lot of work to do in regards to engaging women into the philanthropic space?
So, like I said before, I'm a learner. And so I'm always looking for different opportunities where I can enhance my knowledge. So about 6 years ago, the Indiana School of Philanthropy launched a course called Engaging Women as Donors. I want to go to that because that's going to be psychology. So I went, I came back, and the university had said, share the information. So I came back and I presented at a conference and I had a couple of males squirming in the audience. And they said, if we were to get up and say those things, we'd be accused of being discriminatory. And I said, what I'm telling you is factual. It's not making it up. It's historical and factual. But then it got me thinking, but is all this information translatable to Australia? So that's what prompted the research project in talking to women about their motivations behind giving and talking about the decision makers. So yes, what was surprising to me was women are making the decisions. I mean, the latest gift from Lindsay and Paula Fox to the National Gallery, Lindsay stood up and said, I just wrote the check. It was Paula's really passion and idea.
Do you think there's been a shift in, I think women potentially behind closed doors have made the decisions for quite a while now.
Absolutely.
Are we getting to see them have more recognition now and starting to make those decisions in front of the camera and in the limelight rather than behind closed doors?
What the transition has been is women in the workforce and earning their own money and saying, no, I have the right to make some decisions on how I give my money away. So yeah, there has been a shift in that. And I did a project with one client and met with over 100 couples. And at the end of every discussion would say to them, okay, so if we were to go ahead with one of the 3 projects, which one would you be interested in? And I kid you not, every single time the male would look at the female and wait for her to answer. And then I'd say, and okay, if we were to go ahead with that, who should I talk to? And he'd always say, talk to her. So to me, that's not surprising. What's surprising is that organizations and on-the-ground fundraisers haven't caught up with that. That they still, best practice says you go to the male. And if you go to the male and you leave her out, you've just done yourself a disservice.
Burnt the deal.
Yep.
Yeah, there's something that you mentioned in podcasts you've done previously and also some things that I'd read in your notes. And as a modern day male, it made me feel really uncomfortable. But I think uncomfortable from the fact or the perspective that it's probably true. One of them was that as you climbed up or pushed through and forged into your corporate career in America, that you felt that real glass ceiling from men within your organisation. There was 3 points I wanted to raise, but I'm going to put them all into one because I think it's relevant. The other one was that it was really prevalent when you moved out to Australia that maybe that situation was even worse here in Australia, that men didn't take women serious in business.
Absolutely.
And then the third one, which we'll talk about, was the fact that men give off the back of ego and for tax purposes. And like I said, I mean, as a young male, middle-aged male in Australian corporate life, like that really sits uncomfortably with me that that's potentially true. Maybe males need to be a little more empathetic and certainly inclusive. I mean, not in my business. I think the women within my business are the shining lights of my business. I mean, I'm absolutely inspired and driven by the women that are in my business, but, maybe that's not the case across the board, and that's sad, isn't it?
It is. It's funny. Yesterday I was at a lunch. My husband was sitting between myself and this other lady, and she was asking me what I do. And so I explained philanthropy, and then also said I'm now the CEO of the Australian Gynaecological Cancer Foundation. And so we started talking about that, and as middle-aged women, how most women don't know that there's 8 gynae cancers and what to look for. So we're talking about the awareness and philanthropy around that. And she was talking about her own philanthropy. And she said, but my husband's completely different. And I said, well, it's interesting. I had a close friend lose her husband suddenly a few years ago. And after he passed, she said to me, Kim, we would sit down and go through what organizations we wanted to give to. He had his, I had mine. We had ones that we gave together. She said, but I thought I was across it. And she said, now that he's gone and I'm going through all his papers, I'm finding all these organizations he gave to that I had no clue about. I said, all right, let's do some forensic deep diving into it. Does he know people associated with those organizations? And he did.
No better private investigator or forensic accountant than your wife.
That's right. And so we found that he had friends that were associated. So it was kind of like, hey, give to this and I'll give to you the organization you want to. So that happens more with males than it does females. Females are the nurturers. It's innate in us. So what my research project showed was women deep dive into an organization. They want to know the impact. They want to know who's involved, who's on the board. Can they volunteer? Can they get close to those that are receiving the assistance from the organization? They want to feel like it's an extension of their family and to be a part of it. So once you've got them, once they've donated, that's that relationship. They're yours. It's up to you then to lose them. Where males are more, all right, yeah. I mean, go to an event where there's a live auction. Who's doing the bidding? Men. And they're looking at each other going, he's not going to win this. I'm going to win this. So it's that whole competitive ego thing where you do a dinner or a luncheon for women. They don't bid. They'll buy raffle tickets, but they're not going to bid. So I think back to my point that fundraisers really need to change their best practice and focus on the couple and then deal with who the couple says is the main decision maker.
Then there's probably sectors of the Australian corporate world that need to change as well.
Absolutely. Yep.
So I've got pitching this now at my target audience. So I've got a business out there earning money. I've got a good income, or I'm running a company that generates good money. I want to push my company down the path of philanthropy. Mm-hmm. I come to you and I engage you as a consultant. Firstly, for you, that must be really rewarding because you're getting in at ground level and right at the inception and helping them. But I think, and like I said, that's rewarding for you, but there's so many businesses out there that don't know how to do that and they need someone like you. They come to you, they engage you. What does that look like? What do you do?
Well, it would be to talk about their mission and vision, and do they want to align their philanthropy with that? Most companies do. So, for instance, you look at Ostelin, who provides a lot of vitamins and things like that, but their main mission is around bone health. So they get involved with osteoporosis and things like that. So you can see the correlation. It makes sense. Since COVID, a lot of companies are actually changing and saying, you know what, we need to be more engaged with our employees, the employees that we have left. And so let's find out what's important to them. And maybe we pick 1 or 2 charities that they want to be aligned with, or maybe we engage in workplace giving. So we'll match everything that they give to encourage that philanthropy. So it would be to go through a series of steps about what is it that you want to achieve. Do you want your employees to be able to volunteer for those organizations? Give them 2 days a year where they can get out there in the community.
And once you've gone into these organisations, how many of them succeed in pushing through and achieving their philanthropic goals? Most of them?
Yeah. If they were to engage somebody like me, they're pretty committed and want to do something. A lot of the big companies have departments that look after this sort of stuff, but the smaller ones would just engage someone like me and then put somebody, maybe head of HR or somebody like that, in charge of implementing it.
Yeah. And talking about the organisations, and before we started the podcast, you touched on over COVID that there was all these new charities and organisations that popped up because of a willingness to help. I think when we did our research, and these figures have probably changed now, but at the point when I started my podcast, there was 60,000 registered charities in Australia. And you being at the coalface of connecting donors to organisations, do you think we've got philanthropy/donor fatigue in Australia at the moment?
We're probably heading into a recession. Giving always goes up in a recession. If you look through history, the stats tell us that giving increases. And it's because people realize, yeah, okay, I'm doing it tough, but you know what? I've got a roof over my head, feeding my family. There's people out there doing it tougher. So they give. I often have organizations say to me, well, we need to work out the best time to do a campaign. There is never the best time because there's always other organizations running campaigns or there's always competing something. So you have to work out what's best for you and what makes sense for your organization. And then make sure you've got your story that's emotive. You've got a narrative that people are going to relate to. And so donor fatigue, no, I think we're fatigued from floods, fires, and pandemic. But, when it comes to giving, it's still happening.
And in regards to donor fatigue, and you're saying that we don't have it, is there potential for donor fatigue when we're seeing these ads on TV all the time for these really big charities? And again, I don't want to keep quoting you, but some of the things that you've got on your website are really amazing. And you say that as much as an organisation gets excited about receiving a gift, the donor feels 10 times better for giving the gift.
Absolutely.
And often with these bigger charities, you simply don't see where your money's going and potentially don't get the gift yourself of that feeling of knowing that you're helping. With the smaller charities that you can get involved in where you can see where your money's going, it would be nice to think that there's not donor fatigue there, or as we go into a recession and there's hard times, potentially people redirect their focus to the smaller charities that really are needing the help of Australians right now and will really struggle if we do hit donor fatigue.
Yeah, I think COVID had that shift where donors gave to their local organizations that were helping the community rather than the bigger ones. And like I said before we started today, some of the bigger ones kind of have shot themselves in the foot with not spending the money where it was given to be spent. And I see those ads on TV too. You give $5 a month, give $2 a month. And my cynical fundraising brain goes, all right, I know what they're doing. They're looking for regular donors. And if they get X amount, they can do a lot with that. But as a donor, giving $5 a month, what am I really achieving? And is that me personally wanting to see a bigger impact? And yes, it is. So I don't give that way. I give bigger gifts to smaller organizations where I can see the impact. And I think we'll see more of that, which one of the ladies that I interviewed during the research project named a big organization that she gives to. And I said, oh, fantastic. Yeah, they're a brilliant organization, but why do you give to them? And she said, well, because I always have. I said, okay, good. And I said, and what do they do that really inspires you? And she said, well, they do a lot of good things in the community. I said, yeah, but can you pick any? She said, no, I just know they do good things. I'm like, okay. And she was an older lady, but I think we're going to see less and less of that attitude, especially with the millennials. They really want to be involved in organizations and to see impact, and not in 2 years, in 2 weeks or 2 months. They want it done now. They're in the generation of things happen now. And so they're going to put that pressure on charities to make sure, well, here's my money. Let's do it.
What are you doing with it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're someone that's quoted as being someone that walks the talk. You're all over philanthropy in Australia, and you know who's who in the zoo. If you're someone out there at the moment that wanted to give but doesn't know who to give to, who do you align yourself with? What organisations do you align yourself with?
To me, health and education are really important. So one of the interesting things was my son's 24 now, but when he was in year 12, he came home and he said, and he was a prefect, and he said, Mum, can you come talk to the prefects? Why? What have you done? What do you want to do? And he said, we want to leave our gift to the school, but we want it to be a scholarship for a student who wouldn't normally be able to attend that school. Well, my heart just grew. I thought, oh, he was in a really good school where philanthropy was important, but to see these boys come together to want to do this, I thought, good on you. So I went and I talked to them, And one of the teachers came up to me afterwards and he said, "Don't tell these boys that they can achieve that, because I don't think they can." And I said, "Don't put limitations on these boys, because they can achieve anything they want." Well, they achieved it. They raised their goal and provided a scholarship. And that scholarship is now ongoing because that inspired other year levels to do the same thing. So to me, that's something I will always give to because, well, my son was involved and it was important. Yeah, very proud of it. So yeah, I think like most people, we give to things that are close to us or that have affected our family. And a lot of philanthropists don't sit down and write down their values as a person or as a family. And when you write those values down and then you write down the organizations you're giving to and compare, it's like, well, do those organizations reflect my values? And they should. So getting people to sit down and do that exercise, again, is that whole psychology behind the giving, is something I think that's really important, because it'll be like, oh yeah, somebody's just tapped me on the shoulder to give to this organization. Okay, but does that align with what we normally give to? So what I just say to people is do that exercise, pick the organizations that you want to give to, and then have a little fund for those unexpected, whether it's a crisis or an ask that you didn't expect to happen, that you think, yeah, no, that's okay, I'll give to that.
And I've asked the questions today and tried to cover as many topics as I can, but if there was something that you wanted to get across or a topic you wanted to talk about, what would it be? What's important to you?
What's important to me is that people embrace their philanthropy, that they celebrate it, that they're not ashamed to talk about it. So many of the women that I spoke to couldn't tell me what their parents or their siblings did in terms of philanthropy. They just don't talk about it. Why don't you talk about it? I don't know. It's just something we've never talked about. Well, you should. Be proud of what you do for the community and just, celebrate it. That word always comes up. It's celebrate your philanthropy. And in the fundraising space, I really think it's essential that we turn away from being focused on organizations and be more focused on the donor. We've always talked about being donor-centric, but if you really drill down into what organizations do, even when it comes to stewardship and thanking, it's about the organization. It's not about the donor, because women don't necessarily want recognition or to be thanked. They just want to see the impact. You want to invite them to come see the impact? They'd be thrilled, but they don't need everything else. So, and I think we're going to see a more inclusivity of all donors. So if somebody's giving $100 a year and somebody's giving $100,000 a year, maybe it's the same sacrifice for both, but should we be treating the $100,000 donor better than the $100 donor? Because that $100 could mean
if they've only got $100, they've given everything they've got.
Yeah.
So final question, you mentioned the millennials before. Is the philanthropic space in Australia in a good place, changing it into the hands of the next generation, or is there work to be done?
I think philanthropy is exciting for the millennials. I think they're going to challenge not-for-profits, which is fantastic, and I think they're going to make things happen. I was on the board of a few organizations that had kids involved and things like that, and I'd come away from all my encounters going, okay, I feel better. This country's going to be in good hands. These kids get it. So, I think it's an exciting time. I think non-for-profits are really going to be challenged and are going to have to change and pivot, that lovely new word in our vocabulary. So between them and women, I think not-for-profits are really going to have to relook at how they're running their programs.
To wrap it up, and probably, if not most importantly, certainly right up there, is that to the listeners out there that are like me, that want to get into the philanthropic space but don't know how to do it, they can come and engage you. They get on your social media, LinkedIn, Kimberly Downes, and they can talk to you and get you to come and point them in the right direction.
Absolutely. I think for people like you, it's sit down, look at your values. What's important to you? Where do you want to see impact? Is that health? Is that environment? Is that education? Where is it? And so many organizations have shifted and are giving to mental health and environment right now. It's hard not to find an organization that's not, which is fantastic, because those are two critical things that we're facing right now. But it's to look at what's important to you as a person, and then to say, okay, well, what organizations are working in that space? Make a little list and then do some research on them, see which one, that one looks like they're doing good stuff. I might go have a chat with them. As a potential donor approaching an organization, you will blow them out of the water because it's them that's usually approaching people. They're looking for donors. It's not donors that are normally looking for organizations. So hopefully we can shift that too.
And hopefully people do reach out to you because there is a real need moving forward for us all to help each other.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being on my podcast today. You're amazing.
You. Oh, thank you. This was fun.
Thank you. A huge thank you to Kimberly Downes for your generosity and spirit, for her unshakable commitment to philanthropy and for her kind hospitality. To learn more about Kim's role of CEO of the Australian Gynaecological Cancer Foundation or discover how you can engage Kim's expertise, check out our show notes for contact details.
To learn more about the art of giving back in whatever way you can, visit our website andrewpurdie.com.au and follow us on Instagram, The Hidden Philanthropist. Thank you for listening to the Hidden Philanthropist podcast, proudly presented by the Purdie Foundation.